After World War II, the government created the GI Bill, which was a measure to help young soldiers returning from war to assimilate back into their country. It did this by making housing and education very affordable. The measure was a huge success, and people took advantage of its generosity. However, the housing was mainly outside of cities in single-family homes. Thanks to this bill and the advancement of the automobile, there was a huge outbreak of suburbs and white flight. The suburban dream was made possible. There could be an affordable lifestyle away from the pollution and dangers of the city. Over time, the popularity of suburbs became overwhelmingly preferable to that of cities. In fact, a 2018 study found that 55% of the U.S. population live in suburbs, and about 64% of all homes in America are single-family households. One issue with this vast proportion of single-family homes is that they are generally zoned to be in a space only with other single-family homes. In many cases, they branch off larger roads and create a microcosm of residential living everywhere. So, in many neighborhoods, the only way to get out of it is to own an automobile. This phenomenon is called car dependency. In an effort to link and connect places and people by using the car, we have created a dependency on cars and built our environments for cars to dominate our domain. A result of this is the urban highway. Cities welcomed these highways in the 1950s and 60s, mainly in an effort to ease congestion and allow easier connectivity across the city and its suburbs. However, cities are dense, and highways do not fit in cities. Therefore, cities destroyed large chunks of themselves to force the highway to fit. The people live in cities, so cities had to decide who the highways were going to displace. One way urban planners figured this out was by looking at how highways could contribute to urban renewal. In order to improve a city, they thought, they should practice slum clearance, as it could modernize the city's image and boost land value. So, in just about every urban freeway project in the history of the United States, the highways were planned to run straight through poor minority communities. These underrepresented populations have virtually zero political power to prevent this. So the highways were planted, benefiting millions of people, yet further harming those who were already some of the worst off in the city. In 1968, the Claiborne Expressway in New Orleans opened. It was built on top of the main strip of the Treme District, a historically black neighborhood in New Orleans. The project destroyed the oak trees that lined the boulevard, and many stores along it went out of business. The reason this happened is that unlike the boulevard, which was designed as a place for people to enjoy being in, it was now hostile to people and only served cars. Because the highway is elevated, these cars run straight over the neighborhood without glimpsing sight of what is beneath them, and makes the likelihood of anyone pulling over for commerce almost nothing. This can be seen by the economic degradation of the area. In 1950, there were 123 businesses there, and about 50 years later, just 44. On top of this, there were around 500,000 square feet of residential and commercial life erased. Of course, there was a lot of pushback against the highway. However, it was just after the civil rights movement, so there was still a lot of racism. One local who lived through the destruction of her neighborhood said this about it: "This is white versus black versus white. And in the South, if you're black, you're not going to win. So this is something white folks want. That's what they got." What the expressway replaced was not just a strip of the land, it was the biggest gathering center for the community. By putting a highway there, it not only divided the community, but also degraded it. A substantial amount of racism contributed to the installation of that highway. However, just because it degraded one community, does that mean it was really the wrong thing to do? After all, highways are a service. They lead to increased connectivity, faster travel times, supply chain efficiency, reduced congestion on local roads, destinations are accessible for tourists, and more. Obviously, these are beneficial to the well-being of the country, but is it right? From a utilitarian viewpoint, yes. Urban freeways help millions of people move around, stimulate economic activity, and make life much more convenient and easier for the people who use it. It is unwise to remove a freeway too because of the inconveniences and economic stagnation that will occur. A utilitarian may also look at the highway placement differently, thinking this: because the installation of highways is so expensive, it must be done on the cheapest land possible. Generally, minorities have lived in the cheapest parts of the city. Therefore, the construction of highways isn't tied with race so much as it is with affordability. This makes there be less of an injustice. So in this case, because there is enormous economic benefit from the highway, where the displacement of the people has more to do with affordability than racism, this decreases the social cost of the project and does not undermine the citizens' dignity nearly as much. So, building the highway in Treme is justifiable. There is validity in this statement. Building on cheap land makes sense. But from a Rajan point of view, looking behind the veil of ignorance, the burden of having to move because your home is destroyed or having your business go bankrupt due to an expressway is much greater than the burden of sitting in traffic on your way back home from work. From this viewpoint, planting a highway in this spot is not the right thing to do, and other solutions should be found. There are also flaws in the argument that highways were built because of affordability reasons more than they were racial issues. Because because racial discrimination had inhibited the economic success of minorities for such a long time, of course the cheapest land was going to be owned by minorities. Racism had become so deeply intertwined with socioeconomic status that it is illogical to think of them as separate. Because white Americans had established economic inequality based on race, destroying a community due to affordability reasons is still racist. Now, the Treme district, unfortunately, is not unique in its story. Overtown, a black Caribbean neighborhood in Miami, formerly known as the Harlem of the South, had around half its population displaced for the construction of the interchange of I-95 and I-395. Jim Crow laws prevented them from having any way to stop it. Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, two adjacent black neighborhoods in Detroit, were entirely erased by the creation of I-375 portion of the Chrysler Freeway, a residential park, and Ford Field. Ironically, the neighborhood's economy centered around auto manufacturing. The Dan Ryan Expressway runs through the west and south side of Chicago. Around 81,000 people were displaced with the construction of it in the 1960s, with 64% of them being black. Keep in mind, black people only made up 23% of the population. The others displaced were mainly Hispanics, Asians, and recent European immigrants. There are many more stories just like these, and there are big reasons to care about them. The first reason why urban highways are a problem is because of the health risks associated with living near them. Needhammer.gov says that children living within 250 yards of a highway with 20,000 vehicles per day are 6 times more likely to develop all types of cancer and 8 times more likely to get leukemia. The Claiborne Expressway has around 70,000 daily vehicles. Cardiovascular, respiratory, reproductive, and endocrine problems have all been linked with living close to freeways too. Black and minority children in urban areas are significantly more likely to have predisposed health problems compared to their white counterparts. Noise pollution is a big problem as well, as it causes sleeping difficulties and lots of stress on the body. Low birth weight has also been associated with highways. These are all environmental injustices. Curry's research shows that properly nurturing a child is fundamental to their future success. In this situation, it is impossible to have control over properly nurturing a child. Because children are being born at a disadvantage, their capabilities for emotion, bodily health, practical reasoning, and affiliation are all compromised. Problems brought about by these are more likely to exacerbate poverty because a lower functioning population will limit the future success of their society. Their lack of control over this is an infringement on their dignity. The second reason why the injustice of urban freeways is an issue is because the people who are displaced are less likely to even be able to use the freeway. In these poor neighborhoods, many people do not have cars, but they have to deal with other people's cars in their space. And while many don't have cars, the consequences of car dependency have resulted in many poor people to essentially be forced to own a car. This is an extra burden on them, but it is necessary to own to get to work, to the grocery store, or any other place they need to be. Public transit in most American cities is so impractical and unreliable that many people would rather give themselves the burden of owning a car over waiting on their city's transit system. It can be argued that although there are still issues with urban freeways, these happened in the past, so the racial aspects are not as important to address. This is untrue. The social injustices of highway expansion continues today. Houston is expanding its freeway and is removing some schools, churches, and over 1,000 homes. Two neighborhoods that are heavily affected by this is Independence Heights, a black neighborhood, and Near North Side, a Hispanic neighborhood. Caltrans's expansion of I-5 affects the municipality of Downey in LA. This neighborhood is 75% Hispanic and only 12% white. 200 homes are going to be removed. This is not in the past. The construction is happening right now. The most upsetting thing about the construction of highways is that expansion only exacerbates the problem. The more highways there are, the more people are going to use them. This is a mathematical theory called induced demand. Mathematically, new cars will come and will congest the already expanded freeway. It is proven again and again with every new expansion, or as they say in traffic engineering, improvement. And every new improvement has and will displace more and more people who have already been impacted enough by their city's highway. So we should care about this because the problem is not just in the past, it is still happening and it will continue to happen. The urban poor are not only affected by the highway itself, but also by the urban sprawl that has resulted with the construction of them. With white flight comes urban blight. Commuters from the suburbs come into the city to work, earn their money in the city, then go back to the suburbs to spend it. On top of this, many suburbs also become job hubs, and more people are taken out of the city. The city is often left with its poorest populations who cannot afford to live in the suburbs. so the city has no choice but to provide for the people who don't even live there. This can even be seen in the most thriving urban cities. The Chicago metropolitan area is about 50% white and 15% black, while Chicago proper is 33% white and 28% black. Because white people hold most of the wealth, it can be inferred that lots of suburban commuters are serving their suburbs much more than the big city. In many cities, this kind of displaced investment leads to urban decay. So those living in urban cores not only must put up with its highways, but also deal with their city's degradation that results from these highways. Time after time, governments prioritize their wealthier white citizens when addressing their transportation problems. Building highways does not respect the dignity of everyone, so the practice needs to be changed. To do this, we must change the way we plan our cities. The single-family home is an inevitable result of urban sprawl, but it is unfortunately idolized. Of course, there is good reason to want one. You get your own piece of property, and some may say greater autonomy and safety. Because sprawl exacerbates traffic and car-centric infrastructure, it is necessary to find viable alternatives to cars. Safe, reliable, and clean public transit is the best solution to this. Developing dense neighborhoods and revitalizing decaying parts of cities are essential for this as well. Rotterdam, the Netherlands, transformed a high-crime street into a low-crime street by increasing police visibility, cleaning the streets, lowering speed limits, and clearing graffiti. Over 2 years, drug crime dropped by 30%, vandalism by 31%, and burglary by 22%. So while many people think that suburban-style homes are inherently more safe, clean, and pleasant to be in, this research suggests that a lot of it has to do with the investment into the street itself. Although denser neighborhoods would mean there is less space, walkability enhances autonomy, especially for those who can't drive, like old people, disabled people, and kids. So while there will still always be people who prefer their suburb, it is unfair that there is hardly even an option to live in a safe, walkable urban setting. Luckily, there are plenty of countries that understand the importance of urban vibrancy. Europe and East Asia have amazing public transit systems, and they also went through a car is king phase. Utrecht, the Netherlands, had replaced a canal with a highway, but then they reversed it back into a canal. So it is possible to change the bad habits of our country, and if we want to address and respect the dignity of everybody, then it is imperative. The mistreatment of poor minority communities must change, and there are ways to change it that can benefit everybody.